Ken Mitchell, our first speaker.
Good morning, everybody. Morning. Thank you. Thanks to the organizers for having me, and thanks to everyone here for being up at this is an early hour for a presentation, so I'll try and keep you awake here. My name is Ken Mitchell. I'm from the Environmental Protection Agency. I work in the Atlanta office, which is downtown here in Atlanta, and we oversee the 8 southeastern states, so like the bottom right-hand third of America. I wear a lot of different hats. My main title is I'm the kind of this technical and policy advisor to the Clean Air Director for EPA Region 4. But I also lead all 10 EPA regions on clean energy and climate change issues. We kind of, it's easier for headquarters to talk to one region than to talk to 10. So I am kind of the intermediary with all 10 regions on clean energy and climate change, including the 111D program, which I'm going to talk about this morning. And then the other big thing that I spend a lot of my time on is that once the 111D rule becomes final, I'll be in charge of overseeing the team that works with our southeastern states to develop their plans and hopefully get them approved expeditiously. So I'm going to I know a lot of people are still, a lot of people are really into the weeds of what's in this Clean Power Plan. And a number of people just know a little bit about it, and many people are still fuzzy on some of the details, including me. So I'm going to take a few minutes this morning and walk through what the Clean Power Plan is, where it came from, why we're doing it. And then there have been a couple of new things that just happened last week that I'll end with. And I've got to figure this thing out first. So I'm going to talk about EPA, first start off and tell you why we're doing this, and some of the other things we do at EPA on climate change, and then spend the bulk of my time on the Clean Power Plan. So if you look at where greenhouse gas comes from, emissions come from in just America, you'll see that about 28% of the emissions come from the transportation sector. Another 40% come from a variety of miscellaneous sources. And then about the largest portion, though, comes from making electricity. So our largest source of greenhouse gases in America are from how we make electricity, primarily with coal, oil, and gas. And if you look at what we're doing to try and reduce those emissions, we have, gosh, I did it again, sorry. We have a very robust regulatory program for this sector. It involves making cars, trucks, planes, trains, boats their engines more efficient. It also involves making the fuels that they run have a smaller carbon footprint. So it's the combination of more efficient engines and less carbon intensive fuels that has made a dramatic change in the miles per gallon, if you will, for many of our cars and trucks. Just last week we announced that the American car fleet is the most fuel efficient ever, and that's going to continue. And that's good for America because it means that we get more miles out of the same amount of gas, people spend less money, and pollution is reduced. So that's a good thing for, I think most people have rallied around that one. I'm gonna have to get a new one of these. For these three areas, we have a number of, I would call them voluntary or partnership programs where we target in on an important industry sector. And we work with them to find ways to reduce their emissions, a lot of times primarily through efficiency. And so these strategies are also win-win strategies. They help companies reduce their emissions, they help them save money, they get them good publicity. There's just, there aren't a lot of drawbacks to many of these things. Think about Energy Star. I won't ask you to raise your hand if your last purchase was an Energy Star appliance, because I'm going to assume that it was. And if it wasn't, I'm going to assume you're going to go buy your next one is Energy Star. So Energy Star has been just a huge success. It's a, it's a program that we do between EPA and DOE. But it's really the kind of the state of the things now. You go into a Lowe's or Home Depot or an H.H. Gregg, and you'll see most of the appliances are Energy Star. They're saving us money, saving us pollution. This is the tricky one. Most of our greenhouse gases come from how we make electricity. Coal-fired power plants primarily, and second, gas. So we, up until just recently, haven't done anything to regulate those emissions. And so what I'm going to tell you about next is the primary rulemaking that we're putting out to try and, for the first time, really directly establish standards and programs for greenhouse gases. Just as an aside, there's another thing called when you build a new plant or modify an existing plant, you have to go through a permitting process to get an air quality permit. And there's some work you might have to do there on greenhouse gases. But for the most part, that doesn't, it may not get at the largest source of greenhouse gases, which are the existing power plants, the things that are already sitting there with a permit that are just chugging away. So what this Clean Power Plan, really the focus of it is to get at those existing plants that form the bulk of this 32% of greenhouse gas emissions. So a couple of years ago, and someone asked me this question the other day, is there a strategy to address climate change in America? Well, there has been for a long time, but the president came out 2 years ago and kind of refocused, if you will, what we're doing on climate change. Came out with the President's Climate Action Plan. If you're interested in it, it's on the White House, whitehouse.gov. And many agencies in the government have a role to play in making that plan become a reality. What I've listed out here are the piece of the President's Climate Action Plan which belong to EPA. So helping build that 21st efficient transportation sector, cutting waste in homes, businesses, and factories, think Energy Star and other programs. Methane is the second most important greenhouse gas, and we have legal authority under the Clean Air Act to address some of the sources of methane. And we're also working collaboratively with things like the agriculture industry to reduce their methane emissions from large animal feeding operations. Of course, climate change is here already, and we're already feeling the effects of it. So to just try and reduce emissions won't get it. We also have to work at the same time to prepare our communities for the impacts of climate change. We cannot do this alone. America cannot fix climate change on its own. China has to pitch in, India has to pitch in, the European Union has to pitch in, and so on and so forth. We have a robust efforts to help with the State Department to work in the international community to try and get them on board with reducing their own emissions. And then lastly, and probably the thing that people are talking about most now is reducing carbon pollution from power plants. Again, getting at that biggest piece of emissions that we've not really addressed in the past. So in addition to his plan, when he put his plan out, he also put a memo out to EPA, and the memo gave EPA direct and very specific marching orders. It said put out a new proposal for new power plants, get it proposed by January 8th. We did that. So there's a proposed rule out there. The comment period's closed, but the rule is out there, and it sets a limit on CO2 emissions for plants that are built from the ground up. There are a few plants that become what are called modified or reconstructed. There aren't very many of them, so I won't focus on that. But basically, we had to propose a rule for them by June of this year, which we did, and we had to finalize it by June of next year. But here's really the chunk of it: existing power plants. We were told by the president to propose a guideline by June of 14, which we've done. Finalize those guidelines by June of 2015, and as far as I know, we're on track to do that. And then the states have to turn in their plan for how they're going to implement the guideline in their state by June of 2016. And all of this, if you're interested, is on epa.gov/clean power plan. So we're working quickly to do that. Now, what makes this effort really unique, I've been around EPA and environmental consulting firms and state agencies for longer than I care to admit, and I've never seen any of them do what we've done here. The president told us in the memo, when you do this effort, do an unprecedented, really, outreach effort and make sure you talk to the people who know about this, who can help craft a rule that makes sense for the country. Listen to them, engage them as much as possible. We did that. We have reached out to hundreds of utility, consumer, labor, and environmental groups. We held 11 public listening sessions before we proposed the rule. We had literally thousands of people show up and thousands give comments. We reached out to all 50 states, and we wanted to hear from people about both why we need to address carbon pollution, understanding the dynamic nature of the electricity system, and how we can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions at the same time we continue a robust growth in our economy. And one of the key set of issues that came out of those discussions was we've got to keep the lights on. We have got to be flexible because this is a big ship to move. It's got to be affordable, and they will need ample time to implement this. There's a lot of Clean Air Act rules. The rule comes out and you have 3 years to comply. In our proposal, the rule comes out and we've given you 15 years to comply. So we really have tried in our proposal to hear and act on these key elements. So just to mention a couple, I won't read them all, but just to mention a couple of things that we think the Clean Power Plan will do for the country. We do believe that our proposal really tried to address affordability and reliability. The big thing is that once we get to 2030, according to our modeling, we expect about a 30% reduction in carbon emissions from our power sector. That's a sizable chunk. That is a good start. If you're interested, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the kind of worldwide body of scientists that study climate change and synthesize the state of the science, they come out with their report every 5 or 7 years. They just on Sunday came out with their most recent synthesis report. And to make a long story short, their statements about climate change are more severe, more dramatic, and more compelling. They've used more compelling language than they've ever been willing to use in the past. So I recommend you to take a look at that. That's why we're doing this. So we need to cut those emissions, and this rule, we believe, will do that. There are a lot of co-benefits. As you reduce the carbon, you're also reducing other chemicals such as sulfur dioxide and particle pollution. And ultimately, the health and climate benefits we predict will be worth an estimated $55 to $93 billion by 2030. So if you just look at the smog and soot reductions alone, every dollar that we spend to comply with this rule will get us up to $7 in health benefits. So, I would like to find a stock that does that. I'd buy it. So that's a good cost-benefit analysis. So in developing this rule, we really tried to build on and contemplate the actions that states, cities, and businesses have already done. So this isn't just starting from scratch. We went out and said to you, what works? What are you already doing? Let's build off of that. We also want this rule to spur investment in more efficient technologies, new technologies. We want America to be an exporter of technology and find a way to make money off of that. And as I said, we have to have a reasonable glide path to get us from where we are to where we need to be, but we understand that can't happen overnight. It's going to take a lot of different moving pieces, and we're trying to find that right balance of getting where we need to be in a timely manner and not doing it in such a way that we wreck the car along the way. So don't laugh, please. I give this talk a lot, and usually have somebody throw something at me when I show this slide. But we actually model that, our modeling estimates that by 2030, your average household electricity bill will actually go down. Now, the reason why that is a little complicated. The price per kilowatt hour will go up a little bit. So what they're paying for electricity will go up. But our proposal contemplates that there will be a very significant increase in renewable energy efficiency. So while they're paying a little bit more for their electricity, they're using a lot less of it. And so that's where the 8% number comes from. So I just wanted to point that out. And a lot of people think that that number is way off. We want you to tell us why. So the comment period is still open, and we want to hear what we got right and what we got wrong. A lot of people also ask, is this Obama's war on coal? The answer is no. By 2030, we have modeled that once we get to this 30% drop in carbon emissions from our energy sector, we predict that coal and gas will still be the bedrock of the way we produce energy. So coal is not going to zero. It's going to still remain about 30% of our generation mix. So the president has told us over and over again, this is an all of the above approach. Nuclear, coal, gas, renewables, efficiency, conservation, all those things are part of the mix. But I just want to emphasize that we're not trying to push coal out. We're trying to get our emissions down. However we can do that in a way that retains reliability, affordability, and flexibility. So let me just speak real briefly on the Clean Air Act, part of the Clean Air Act that we're using to do this. You'll hear it referred to as 111D. You'll hear it a lot. You'll also hear it called the Clean Power Plan. That's the 111D part of our program. And the legal underpinning of 111D is that you have to use what's called the best system of emission reduction in crafting the rule. And you can take into consideration things like costs, whether you're getting meaningful reductions. We don't want to write a rule and burden people and get this much environmental benefit. We want to get this much environmental benefit. So are you getting reasonable reductions? Is the technology there to do this? Is it feasible to do? So in many of the 111D rules, they basically boil down to something like you've got a facility, here's a piece of add-on equipment you can put onto it, pollution control equipment, put that on and use best practices and you're done. That won't work with the electricity. That doesn't work that well with the electricity system because you've got emissions coming from the stack inside the fence line, but the best system of reducing those emissions really is a web of things that you can do both inside and outside the fence line. Getting people to buy Energy Star appliances, for example, reduces their use of electricity, which directly relates back to their emissions at the stack. So there are a lot of things that you can do to really make meaningful reductions. And EPA has identified inside and outside the fence line options to establish the best system of emission reductions. So what we did was we analyzed practical and affordable strategies looking across the interconnected energy system. We developed a consistent national equation that we use to calculate a state-specific goal. Each state's goal is a different number, and the reason why is because in that equation, which we applied to every state, their state-specific inputs are different. Some states have a lot of coal, some states have no coal. Some states have a lot of NGCC, some states have little or none. So their inputs into this equation cause them to have a different goal come out the other side. And the goal is stated, it's a statewide number. It applies to all the affected units in their state. But they're also allowed to convert this into a mass-based goal if they like. And the building blocks that we use to create that national consistent formula are really the underpinning of the development of the goals. And so here are those building blocks. I didn't put the equation up because it's just a little too much to look at from the back of the room. But basically, the equation contemplates 4 different things. One, inside the fence line, making power plants as efficient as possible. You just heard a little bit about that, some of the engineering things that are still developing to make power plants even more efficient. Using lower emitting power sources. That means dispatching dirtier power plants to more clean gas plants and getting the same amount of electricity but getting dramatically less CO2. So dispatch away from coal basically towards natural gas combined cycle. Ramp up our use of low and zero emitting renewable energies and other zero emitting energies like wind, wave, solar, that kind of thing. And also ramp up energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is an important underpinning of this program so that we use less electricity, get our stuff done. I like my air conditioner to be on when it's 110 degrees outside. I like coming home at night and flipping the switch and knowing it will come on. But I want to do that in the most efficient way possible. So these are the 4 building blocks that we use to calculate the goal. But then we turn around to states and say, but you don't have to do it this way. Here's the number we want you to get to. You get there however you can get there. You don't have to use our building blocks, although many people will. If you can think of a smarter, cheaper, faster way to do it, go for it. So we've tried, this is what I mean when I say flexibility. We've given a 15-year window to plan and achieve these reductions. They're going to get up to 2 to 3 years to submit final plans, depending on whether they're turning in a state-specific plan or partnering up with some other states to do a regional plan. And then they get to select the measures that they want to use. So we come up with a number, you get there however is best for you. That's basically the theme. There is an interim goal that you have to meet to show that you're making progress towards your final goal. You get a 10-year period to get there, and you just have to check in every couple of years. We have to check in every year, but then you have to, every 2 years, you talk about it in a little bit more depth. But basically, you have to check in and make sure that you're making progress towards your final goal. So there's an interim goal and a final goal. The interim is the average, an average number over a 10-year period. So just to make sure everybody's moving in the right direction and can make changes if things aren't going right. And when states craft this plan to get them to their final goal, they can do all kinds of things. It's just a very flexible program. I just commend you to these items, and I think everybody will have a copy of this when we're done today. The proposed timeline, a little busy, but long and the short of it is the rule will be final next year, plans will be due the next year, and then you can ask for a 1-year extension if you're a state, doing a state plan, or a 2-year extension if you're a bunch of states doing a plan for multiple states. So just a couple of new things, and then I'll be done. We put out 2 new things last week. One is a supplemental proposal. When we did our original proposal, we did not come up with goals for affected EGUs in Indian country, nor did we do so for the overseas territories. So we've now put out a supplemental proposal for 4 power plants in Indian country, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Very similar to what we did in the original proposal. They have a goal that they have to meet. They have to turn in a plan, and there's flexibility in doing that. The key thing I wanted to point out here is if you're interested in this supplemental proposal, the comment period for this closes on December 19th, which is different than everything else. The other big thing that we put out was what we call a NODA, or Notice of Data Availability. In all these many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations we've been having with external stakeholders, we've heard a lot of information from them, and we wanted to take the information they've been giving us and put it back out for everyone to look at as they comment on the proposal. So they commented on 3 basic things. The trajectory or that glide path of getting us from the start of the compliance period to the final goal, the way the building blocks are established, and the way state goals are calculated. But there are we heard other things from people. They'll all be in the docket, well, they'll be in the docket if they turn them in. And so it's not, this NOTA is not intended to be a complete summary of everything we've heard, just a select group of things. So just briefly, the glide path, there have been basically 2 ideas that have come up to make the glide path work better. One is allowing credit for early reductions, which will provide some flexibility to defer other emission reductions until later in the 2029 period. And phasing in Block 2, which is the dispatch from coal to NGCC, phasing it in much the same way that we allowed the phase-in of renewable energy and energy efficiency. So we are looking for people to comment on that. 2 other things that people pointed out was the way we treat natural gas. There's a lot of discussion about building new natural gas. What else was it? I can't remember. I'm reading it with you, and I've only read it twice. So, but some ideas about the treatment of natural gas, using more natural gas as a substitute for coal in coal plants. A number of ideas like that, and then the way we treat renewable energy. Some new ideas about how you might allocate renewable energy in the goal-setting process. And then the last thing, I'm almost done, I swear. The last thing is 2 other issues. One is the way we treated the way we treated Block 2 is not consistent as that we were told, in the same way that we did Block 3 and 4. So in Block 3 and 4, we basically take the renewable energy and energy efficiency megawatts that you produce and put them in the bottom of the equation, but we don't take off the top the emissions that are reduced from coal plants. That's what we did do with NGCC and with Block 1, the making plants more efficient. So we got some comments about, is that really consistent? Maybe you should take the emissions from renewable energy and energy efficiency out of the equation as you add their megawatts into the bottom. So that's the kind of thing that is. And also, a number of people were concerned that we used 1 year of data as our starting point, 2012. So we're making available 2 other sets of data for 2010 and 2011, and asking you to comment on how or should we use a larger data set as the starting point for the goal calculation. And I think last thing is that the proposed rule, all this stuff is on epa.gov/power plan. We've already held the 4 public hearings. We had thousands, again, people show up. And I wanted to point out that the comment period on the NOTA, the comment period on the original proposal are both due on December 1st, not the 19th. So December 1st is still the final date. And please identify your comments to this docket number. You can find instructions on commenting on Clean Power Plan. And also, I just want to, as we go through today, I'm not taking notes on anything you tell me. If you want to be heard in a legal way for purposes of the power plants, you need to write your comments into the docket by December 1st. So I just let everybody know that. So I know we'll have a lot of time to talk about it. I'll be here all day. Please feel free to come up and ask me questions. I'll try and answer them. And that's it.
I'm Patrick Fitzgerald with High Temperature Technologies, and there's been a lot of talk about the greenhouse gas and converting to gas as a fuel, but the one thing that doesn't seem to be addressed is there appears to be, you hear a lot of reports about fugitive gas loss, and it's a much more powerful greenhouse gas potential with the methane. And it is negating its value as a reduction in greenhouse gases if they are if it's being lost to the air versus just burning coal.
Right.
And are you guys doing anything to address that?
Yes. So the question is, this is about power plants only, and the question is in the production and distribution system for natural gas, getting it from out of the ground to that power plant that uses it to make electricity, that there are potentially a lot of leaks in the system, essentially, that release methane, and methane is about 21 to 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So for every ton of carbon dioxide, you get an equivalent of about 24, 25 tons of carbon dioxide for 1 ton of methane. So yes, loud and clear, we've heard that, and we have quite a bit of work going on to find how we can identify the major leaks and ways to reduce them. So absolutely, it's right in the middle of the target. Thanks. Okay, well, thank you, and we'll talk more.